Tech. I'm Zach, and this is Provoking Tech Weekly. This is the weekly podcast for Provoking Tech that includes covers all kinds of different tech topics, from 3D printing and robotics like topics to AR and VR to different aspects of computing, including cloud computing and AI. In today's episode, I have a couple of different articles. We talk about the FCC, the new FCC chairman a little, Cyborg Dragonflies, as well as some space topics. I will possibly start, or in the future, break off the space part of this podcast into its own if this podcast starts to get a little bit of popularity and there's some feedback for that. Because with space, the private space companies starting to really ramp up, I definitely foresee that there'll be a lot of space news increasing in the future. And beyond that, I see that I would like to possibly include kind of the media part of space. There's some great shows out there right now. National Geographic has Mars as a pretty cool docudrama, and there's Expanse and other things like that. So I might, evolve this podcast and kind of separate it in the future. Definitely would like to work on expanding the podcast in general. I have some very cool ideas. I hope next month that I'll kind of have a schedule for live streaming. I am live streaming this episode. Actually, I am doing this the second time because I forgot to hit the record button. So to do the audio versions, I needed to have that local recording. So I feel kind of silly, but I'm just kind of new to this. I've been doing YouTube for about 4 months now, and I'm kind of breaking off this little podcast as its own little independent thing to kind of share some of my thoughts and possibly kind of a co-host in the future if I can find somebody, and kind of give a little bit of different take on the technology of the world. So without further delay, let's go ahead and get started. So the first article I wanted to talk about today is the new FCC chairman. We're going to have a new chairman, Ajit Pai, I think. Not really sure how to pronounce his name, but it seems that he has a lot of favor from the ISPs. So if that's the case, then it might not be good for us as consumers. Whenever the ISPs are happy, it probably isn't going to mean great news. However, I'm really going to withhold my opinion and my analysis until he's had a chance to start doing some things. Net neutrality didn't completely fix our internet, infrastructure in general. Google Fiber was trying to roll out their fiber, networks, and had a lot of problems with ISPs that are already in on the poles and stuff. So actually expanding and improving our infrastructure still is having issues, even with net neutrality. There did do some great things, but maybe the new FCC chairman might implement something even better. I really think we need to withhold our, hate of the guy before he's had a chance to really start doing something. And a lot of people, I just want to bring this up, thought that Tom Wheeler is going to be a horrible chairman, and he turned out to be a pretty good chairman. He's doing some really good things. I'm hoping that the FCC in general continues along that vein. I know a lot of people are thinking that it's going to be all downhill from now, but I think we should give the guy a chance, and hopefully we see some good come out of this, and not completely reversing everything that the last chairman Wheeler has implemented, and the team as a whole throughout his kind of leadership. So that's pretty much all I have to say about that. Just looking forward to see what happens with FCC, and hopefully we can continue to advance our internet infrastructure in the United States, because there's definitely some areas that there's wide disparities of areas that have gigabit internet and areas that have very, very low end bandwidth, especially in like rural areas and smaller communities. And one more internet-based kind of topic is Firefox and Chrome are going to call HTTP connections insecure. If you're watching the video portion of this, you can see there's a little thing where in the new version of Chrome, which was just released, everybody might not have it yet. They kind of do rolling rollouts. or they do rollouts of their updates. But you can actually see when you go to log in, it'll say not secure. That's definitely a great move. Every website that does a login definitely needs HTTPS. I'm working on that. I've just started rolling out my community site, and it doesn't have HTTPS, but I am working on that, and I hope to have that fully implemented within the next week or two. So with that in mind, they're actually talking about possibly all HTTP websites in the future showing as insecure when they're just not even having a password field. So we're starting to see that Google and Firefox are starting to flex some of their muscle, and hopefully that gets websites, especially established websites that have been out for a long time that still don't have HTTPS. It's kind of astounding to see. I would love to see kind of, even community softwares like the one I'm going to be using with Envision Power kind of include that by default. I think that's pretty much mandatory in our day and age. Anything that has login, so that people that start using that software don't have to spend extra time setting it up, and it's right from the get-go. It's already implemented with security. But it's definitely good to start seeing that, and hopefully that encourages websites that aren't already on HTTPS to continue to move forward with better internet-based security, especially with how much information we have in our digital lives stored on the internet. Having that security is just going to be very, very important as our lives continue to be more and more based in the digital realm. Next, I guess this week there were, specifically with the Inquirer, this Ars Technica article mentions them, but I guess there was some failure to impress the media when Microsoft announced that they were only sold thousands, not hundreds of thousands of HoloLenses. I do want to point out, though, that even selling 1,000 of these $3,000 headsets is $3 million. Yeah, which isn't a small sum of money for Microsoft's massive company. It is a drop in the bucket, but it isn't a small sum of money. And selling thousands of these headsets means that we have a lot of developers and companies on the bleeding edge developing for this. This isn't a product that is really ready for consumers yet. There's still a lot of work to be done, and I think Microsoft might possibly be artificially kind of keeping that price high. At least I hope so, because when they're ready for consumers to get it, I hope it drops substantially so that it's easier to adopt. But right now, it still needs to be a lot of development work in the back end as companies kind of integrate into their software. For example, I use 3D CAD software at work all the time, and being able to design in that and then jump to the real world and show that model that I was working on in the real world, it's just going to be phenomenal. It's going to be completely game changing to take your 3D part without it's going to be even more than 3D printing, where you had to wait a couple hours for print to come out, and it might not have been perfect to see if that part that you designed fits up to what your design, whatever it was that you're making it to meet up to. So being able to just visualize that in the real world with pretty accurate sensors that can dictate, and give you feedback instantly on with what you're designing will, definitely transform our world. And beyond that, they've shown a lot of cool videos where it's going to be useful in people's daily lives, as well as across all different types of businesses, from education type things, being able to show, the human anatomy on a completely new level, to contractors on job sites being able to show overlays of what the engineer has visioned and what the real world is showing. I remember seeing one video where they're showing something like that, and it ended up being a beam being placed in the way of, I believe it's a doorway, and the engineer was able to jump on and kind of see what the contractor was seeing and said, okay, we'll just move that over here, left 5 feet, and was able to adjust his plans based on that. So it's definitely going to be a complete game changer, and definitely don't count HoloLens or Microsoft or AR in general out by any shot. It's definitely something that still needs to be developed, and they're pretty much called development kits. They do have the $5,000 commercial set, but still, that's just companies on the bleeding edge kind of adopting and starting to integrate that into their workflows and daily lives. So it's definitely something that I see becoming more and more impactful for industries across the spectrum, but something that is still not really ready for the vast market. So as Microsoft continues to develop it, like a lot of the negative feedback that I hear, people that have tried it out really talking about is the narrow field of view. Having that very wide field of view is going to be awesome, but for the most part, you are usually focused on a portion of your visual, view. But having that expanded in future technology and the price being driven down, hopefully to about a third of what it is, because it does have the computer integrated into it. So is more than just like a standard VR headset. But if they could drive that down to at least half or around $1,000, they definitely will have a very viable hardware out there. And it might take a couple of years before the prices of the hardware that they've developed get down at that level. And as that kind of the price drops, and as they continue to improve on and iterate on their design, we'll see larger and larger adoption. I think it's something that's so massive that it's not going to be something that just fades away, especially with kind of the technology that we've got to now. When the Google glasses first came out, AR was still very young, but it's kind of matured now, where it's really getting to the point where in our daily lives it'll be useful, and especially as a business tool, not only as an entertainment tool, which I see VR fulfilling more of a role. VR isn't limited just to entertainment, but I see VR, especially right now, being integrated definitely into video games and videos, and more of an entertainment-based thing, whereas AR is going to be definitely more useful across the wide spectrum of our lives. And definitely see kind of in the future those kind of two technologies kind of blending into like the mixed reality type headsets, and where you can go in VR mode, just kind of for a little bit of a perspective that my daily life, be able to design in 3D in kind of a fully immersive headset with like a big huge virtual screen, and then when you're ready to test that out in the real world, you could just transform to AR and you only see your part in the real world. So I definitely see, it being something that's huge in the future, and definitely no reason to, use the word, what do they use? I don't know. Anyways, they said some word about being, okay, so Microsoft admits sales figures are in the thousands. And that word being, kind of having a connotation that is not selling well and is not a viable product. And selling in the thousands for something that's this on the cutting edge. And there isn't a lot of support from software, like the CAD software doesn't have a lot of support yet for devices like all of them. So there isn't a lot of reason for a company to spend, especially smaller businesses or huge or even large businesses, which have hundreds of engineers, to invest in hundreds of headsets on something that isn't fully implemented in their software that they use on a daily basis. And a lot of times, especially like if you're like an architect or something, that's we work with like some building contractors and architects along those lines, people that design the systems for different buildings. And a lot of times they might be running on software 2 or 3 years old, because when they start these massive projects, they don't want to kind of upgrade in the middle of a project. So one project might span 2 or 3 years, and while they're working on that project, they might be using software that's 2 or 3 years old. So it might be something that people are really adopting in 2 or 3 years from now, when they're on that software that has these integrations and using those on their daily basis, and when that makes a little more sense. So definitely something I definitely still see massive potential in the next several years. One quick note, the HTC will have a Snapdragon 835. In addition, that'll be later this year. Samsung has their phone, the S8, coming out, I believe, mid-April. So they'll both have 835 chipsets. So the 835, don't really plan on covering a lot of phone stuff, just if you're interested at all. But I thought that phones are starting to release with the 835 is a pretty important thing that I wanted to just brief on real quick. So with the 835, that's jumping down or falling down or upgrading to the 10 nanometer FinFET technologies from the 14 nanometer FinFET technologies. The the cores are seeing slight bumps. There's going to be 4 of the higher end cores and 4 lower end cores from 2 respectively of each. So they're doubling the amount of cores of each tier. Very slight increases in the clock speed of those cores. So that's not the big deal there. The big deal is going to be the doubling of the cores is part of that, as well as the jump from 14 to 10 nanometer technology. What that means is better battery life for the same performance, in addition to hopefully running a lot cooler. If anyone has experimented, and this is kind of where why I'm interested in this, is with I started experimenting with using Unity 3D to design a mobile VR app, just kind of playing around and getting a behind the scenes look on what it takes to design these VR apps that are really going to be, becoming more and more integrated with our daily lives. And if you've ever played around with that, if you're pushing your phone to the max, that phone gets hot in like 15 to 30, 20 minutes. That phone feels like it's on fire. So there's a lot of power being pushed through these phones, and we're really starting to, we were getting to the point prior to VR getting a little bit bigger. Google Daydream is going to be a big push, I think. Having that big standard pushed by Google, upgraded from the Chrome, which was kind of something more of a hobbyist type thing, and and you saw companies kind of having, I guess, lesser quality headsets. Now the Samsung Gear VR is a pretty solid headset, but you saw some of the lesser quality headsets. I have one that was like a $20 headset that isn't amazing, but it gets the job done for a Google Cardboard. But with Daydream View being pushed, that has their little controller that has a level of motion sensing, as well as kind of the trackpad to have a cursor in the game world, the virtual world, as well as having some buttons. Having that kind of complete set pushed by Google is really going to push the mobile VR more into the consumer market. And with it being so cheap, like right now it's $50, normally $80, but they have a special going right now for I think another 2 weeks that is only $50 for being a lot cheaper to invest in. And most people already having a smartphone that's capable of running, not really Daydream, because Daydream's really on the high end. But as people start to get the newer era of phones, we'll see that Daydream View will become compatible on a wider range of hardware and be something that will be very easy for people to get a hold of with a $50 thing that adds on to their already existing smartphone that they already have. It'd be something a little bit easier to encourage people to get to, whereas most people don't have a $600 gaming PC, which is kind of on the lower spec end of the desktop-based VR realm, and they don't have that already in their house, and then they have to buy a $600 headset with controllers. It's a lot harder to encourage people to do that than pick up a $50 headset that can, to a degree, do some of the same things. We're starting to see Intel also has their VR headset, which hopefully is compatible with mobile phones in the next couple years, that can kind of sense your hands, and with kind of being all integrated into a single headset, I think that's going to be pretty great too. I don't know if they're going to plan on having any integrations with phones though, because they're probably going to be trying to push their own chipsets. But that'll be something, would be awesome if there's some variation of that, where you have those real sense type cameras that could sense the world around you and have that blend between the desktop experience and the mobile experience that we have right now. So anyways, the 835, getting back to that topic real quick, is going to be starting to roll out in some phones this year. And it'd be cool to see, once that has been released, to see kind of what that means for VR. The GPU is getting a slight upgrade. but it'd be cool to see kind of how much that upgrade actually impacts using mobile VR. All right, so now on to one of the main topics of today. I thought this was pretty interesting. There's Cyborg Dragonflies. The goal here is to possibly use them for guided pollination. If you've seen White Rabbit Project, which has the build team from Mythbusters, and that's like Tori, Grant, and Carrie, I believe. Don't remember the names 100%, but they had a episode on mind control, and one of their topics in that video or in that episode was a cockroach that had this, looks pretty similar to what this setup has, but they were able to kind of control its movements to a pretty decent degree. It sounds like this might be kind of the next evolution of that. It actually has a solar powered circuit board on it, so that it should continue to charge and be able to be powered for longer periods of time. This also introduces cyborg type, creatures becoming a possible reality in our world. So I see that as being something that might be a controversy to a degree, where cybernetics is something that is possible, and the article mentions that in this day and age where cyborg insects are no longer even raise an eyebrow. Hell, you can even order the kits. I don't know if that's going to be the full reaction from the world as a whole, but it is something that's interesting as we kind of see the bee populations being impacted. Definitely something that I hope that we can solve, but as we see that kind of having negative impacts on our world, having something that could take their place if the worst came to be is going to be something that's going to be pretty awesome. In addition, having something that you can guide your pollination, so you can have intended breeding of plants, where people are trying to breed new species by combining two species, having that done through these kind of cybernetic dragonflies, I definitely see being useful for the agricultural market. So definitely interesting to kind of see where the technology is now. So that's pretty much all that I have to say about that. It'll be interesting to see where the technology goes from here. Boeing has introduced some new spacesuits. For those just listening, this probably won't be too interesting for you because it's more of a visual thing. But these new spacesuits are pretty awesome looking. They kind of give you that little bit more futuristic vibe, definitely more than our current spacesuits. They look like they might be a little bit less bulky. In one of these pictures, they breach on like touchscreen sensitive gloves. So definitely coming to the era where they're being able to be used with our technology that we already have. So it's interesting to see the development on this, as the next article, or two articles from now, in the space kind of category, I'll be talking about Boeing and SpaceX getting commercial crews. So this is going to be one of the important things for those companies to have their commercial crews, is the development of the next generation of spacesuits. So that's pretty much it for this article. Definitely cool to see their advancements in there and to see what the future of our spacesuits might look like in the near future. SpaceX is about to launch one of its final expendable rockets. So what that essentially means is SpaceX is happy with their Block 5 version, which is essentially the fifth iteration of their Falcon 9. And at that point in time, the Falcon 9 Heavy will be introduced in the near future. And with this one, they're not going to really be able to launch and land because they're launching the EchoStar 23 communication satellite, which weighs a massive 5.5 metric tons. So launching that big of a cargo will require pretty much all of the energy that the rockets are going to have, that there wouldn't be enough propellant left in the spaceship to be able to launch it on the drone ships like they've been doing. So that means that this will be another expendable type rocket that is more traditional in the commercial space industry. They will be moving to this Falcon 9 Heavy, which would in the future take launches like this and use those the heavier rocket to launch those so they could still launch the first stage boosters back on the drone ships, and smaller packages or smaller cargos would be continuing to be launched by the Falcon 9 that we currently have right now. So we're definitely seeing a point where SpaceX is definitely going to be able to have renewable rockets, which should greatly reduce the cost of launching into space and hopefully bring commercial space to the next tier. And one final topic is technical troubles are likely to delay commercial crew flights until 2019. So both SpaceX and Boeing both have plans to launch in 2018, with Boeing set to launch no earlier than August of 2018, and SpaceX is targeting May of 2018. Ars Technica has a great article on that, and they kind of mentioned where with the issues that they're having, like Boeing's Starliner or the is having some issues. So in their kind of testing and their aerodynamic testing, so we're starting to see the technology start to get to that point where we're going to be able to launch people into space. But I definitely am okay with that being delayed another year. I don't see it a big deal that, if it takes us a couple of years to have the commercial crew flights to get to space, if that means the safety of the scientists that are being launched to the ISS or the future space stations, whenever those arise, it's vital to keep, the space, scientists and the astronauts that are being launched safe. It's one thing to lose a $200 million satellite that is replaceable because, for the most part, it's just components. While those are expensive, it is still something that is replaceable. It's likely covered by insurance, but the loss of human lives is something on a completely another scale. So it's going to be cool to see when that happens, but it's definitely not something that we want them rushing into, because, SpaceX losing a rocket that has inanimate, objects in it doesn't shake the public's, faith in them near as much as, losing actual human lives in a space, launch. So you definitely want to see them to do it right rather than kind of rush to it and be the first ones to space. So it'll be cool to see in the next 2 to 3 years where we're at. It's definitely going to be a turning point when commercial flights are at the point where they're kind of rivaling, our public space organizations. And that doesn't mean nothing against NASA. NASA's doing a great job. They've had several rovers on the Mars that have far surpassed their estimated lifespans, and they're continuing to explore Mars. But with the public funding not being quite on the level of what we really need to really continue to push into space. And I forgot who it was, but someone made the comment about there's a lot of people alive now that were not alive when there was a human last on the moon. And that's just astounding to me. We had that massive push to the moon, and we've kind of degraded, I guess. I mean, we're into space pretty much all the time now with the ISS. So we have a presence in space, and we're doing tests in space all the time. But we made that massive push to the moon, and we haven't been back or gone farther since then. So it's definitely going to be very interesting in this next era of space travel where the private companies are kind of taking the initiative. So that's the last topic about space today. And I wanted to bring up one last thing and do a little bit of promotion on the Thought Provoking Tech blog. You can just go to thoughtprovokingtech.com to have access to the blog. And that'll actually redirect you to interstellarinnovations.com/TPT. But the Thought Provoking Tech just fits the channel name a little bit better. And it's just a simple redirect. Right now I have a blog, essentially just a collection of the videos that I've been doing, but I do hope to increase that to actual blog post in the future. So definitely check that out and bookmark it. I'm working on the community side of it with forums. And I plan on having HTTPS hopefully within the next week, hopefully maybe even this weekend. So stay tuned for that. It'll be great to get that up and running. It'll be awesome to get some people there. The forums layout's pretty much done. Have different topics with different maker topics from 3D printing to programming, science and technology, and even entertainment conversations. In addition, you can kind of see the links to different channels and podcasts that I'm doing. Have a couple different channels I'm starting to launch, as well as the TPT Weekly podcast. So definitely check it out. Let me know what you think. I hope to make an awesome community. If you have any of your own projects that you want to do, I'm completely fine with you posting that stuff here in the near future. So just wanted to plug that a little and give it a little bit of promotion. Working on it pretty hard right now, trying to get it up and running, and then hope to get back to some of my programming and Arduino type projects and 3D printing projects here in the near future. So thanks for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed this podcast. Also, thanks for listening. If you're listening, I hope to have some pretty cool advances within the next month. Kind of have it broke out into stages. Within the next month, I want to get a month of February. I want to have a steady kind of schedule and start planning, having that on a weekly basis and having it at the same time, so I can kind of get a schedule down of having these shows and record them live every week. And then beyond that, I have some pretty cool ideas to evolve the podcast beyond just a simple video and audio podcast to something on a completely different level, using some of the technology that I'm learning about in my spare time, whatever that is. So thanks for watching, guys. I hope you found this interesting. Definitely give me some feedback. There will be an email in the podcast that you can contact me if you're listening to the audio version, or just comment below if you're listening to the YouTube version. So thanks for watching, guys. And until next time, Zach out.